Welcome to the WoW, Wings of Wisdom podcast, where curiosity meets inspiration. Brought to you by the Writing and Communication Center at Ashland University. In each episode, we invite a remarkable guest from our university community to share their journey, explore the power of communication, and unveil the strategies they use to guide students toward growth and success. Whether you're a learner, an educator, or someone captivated by the stories of triumph and discovery in the academic world, you're in the right place. So settle in, open your mind, and prepare to soar on the wings of wisdom. In today's episode of the WoW podcast, we have the pleasure of welcoming a seasoned professional academic advisor in the College of Arts and Sciences at Ashland University. Our guest has dedicated her career to guiding students through their academic and personal challenges with a specific focus on holistic support that goes beyond the classroom. Her passion for storytelling and narratives, fostered by her studies in religion and English literature, has shaped her unique approach to building relationships. With a rich history that includes roles in financial aid, counseling, and health education, our guest's diverse experiences contribute to her profound understanding of student needs. From her earlier work in public health to her current role in academic advising, her journey is a testament to her commitment to student growth and success. Today, we dive into her insights and experiences, and we will try to uncover the stories that dive into her dedication to student success at Ashland University. Victoria O'Brien, welcome to our Wings of Wisdom podcast.
Hello, my name is Mohsin Bensed, and I serve as director of the WCC. Welcome to another episode of the WoW Wings of Wisdom podcast. Victoria, thank you so much for agreeing to be on the show. And I know initially, this episode was scheduled for last week, but we were unable to find a coach who was available during that time. But today we're bringing the heat, Victoria. Ooh. Lauren is here with us, and she is the face of AUTV. Hi, Lauren.
Hi.
Hey, Lauren.
How are you
excited
doing?
To be here.
It's good to be here too.
Awesome. I know, Lauren, Victoria used to be your academic advisor, right? How was your experience working with Victoria?
Oh, I'm nervous now.
It was great. We had a bunch of meetings last year. I think like 3 or 4. Is that how many there are?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it was
at
good.
minimum.
Yeah.
Perfect. Okay. All right. So, Victoria, and pardon my ignorance. So, what does academic advising entail for ignorant people like me? People who are not
well
on what academic advising requires, or
sure.
Maybe in simpler terms. Basically, what is it that you do?
Sure. Well, first of all, don't be hard on yourself because as our listeners may or may not know, you and I are alums of the same university, and our university did not have academic advisors. So I like to say I had no idea academic advising was even a career. I didn't even know really what it was until I got into higher ed, and my first role at a different university was in financial aid. So I also had no clue what advisors even really did. So usually when people ask me this question, the simple answer is I like to say I'm somewhat like a guidance counselor, but for college students. So it's part business where we're looking at scheduling and your courses and registration, but it is certainly much more than that. And that depends a lot on the student and what they need and where they're coming from. So some days I feel a little bit more like a therapist. Some days I feel a little bit more like an advocate or a coach. Some days I feel a little bit maybe like a parent. I always like to tell my students I'm not your parent, but I do care about you. So the nuts and bolts of what we do on a daily basis is we work with students through their first year. Unless you're in nursing or an education student, then you're with us for 2 years. And we help you through the degree planning process. So we will explain all that's required for your degree, whether that's core courses, major related courses, if you have any special requirements. So like journalism and digital media, they have a lot of practicums and hands-on things they have to do as part of their major. Like the history major requires a foreign language. So all those little pieces and parts that we know about that maybe our freshmen don't know about, we talk them through all those elements of their program. Every freshman student should leave their first year advising process with a written out degree plan timeline. And that's something that we create in self-service, which is our system that we use here. And then that's a written plan they can follow from now until they graduate, as they transition on then to faculty advising, and it gives them a nice step of what to follow. Outside of that, advising is more than registration. It's more than degree planning. It can be a lot of coaching you through that first year. So some of our students come here and they are ready for college. They're ready to do it. They're maybe the second or third kid in their family to go. Their parents went to college. They are ready. Other students come in and they maybe are feeling a little bit more unsure. They are not sure they can cut it, or they need help knowing how to manage their time, or they don't really know if they're having an issue in class, how should they approach their faculty? What should they do? And so a lot of times we end up walking through those things with them as well. And then of course you have the occasional conversation of coming in and maybe it's an upperclassman who you haven't seen in a couple years because they've moved on,
Right.
and they come to you and they're like, I woke up one morning and I don't want to be a chemistry major anymore. I'm really passionate about criminal justice. What can I do? And so then that's what I like to call forensic advising, where we get in there and we try to see how we can make this work. Can we make this possible for you and still get you out of here on time? So
Oh,
lots
wow.
of puzzle solving. I love puzzles. I love finding creative solutions. And I think all of us up here on the 7th floor enjoy that part of the job quite a bit. And connecting students with the resources they need. We do a lot of referring out to other offices. I like to say I don't know everything, but I know everyone, or I at least know where to send you to get your questions answered. So we do a lot of that as well, in addition to just the actual nuts and bolts of picking out classes and getting registered. Yeah.
That's incredibly important. I know you touched a bit on this, but in your view, what does a successful advising look like,
Yeah.
and how does it contribute to student retention, especially?
Okay. Good question. I like to say, as a person who loves to talk and loves to have conversation, a big part of advising is listening. As I'm sure you guys know a lot in the writing and communication center, a big part of communication is listening. So a lot of times you need to be a good listener to hear what the student is actually asking you and what they actually need from you. Sometimes they just need you to listen. A question we ask a lot is, do you just want me to listen, or do you want me to help you make a plan? Do you want advice, or you want just a listening ear? And sometimes it's just they just need someone to listen and just to
Right.
hear them talk about whatever it is that's going on in their life. And I think that is a really crucial part of advising, is taking yourself out of it. I think a lot of times, and with anyone, you are in your job and you are confident in what you know, and you know what you're doing, and you have the knowledge and the experience. And sometimes it's easy to, I think, try to front load that in the conversation. Like, well, I know what you need to do, so just do this. But there's no sooner way to get someone to shut down than to just kind of stomp all over them and just say, here, do this.
Hmm.
So a lot of times it's listening. A phrase that I repeat a lot to my students, and Lauren, I don't know if she's ever heard me say this, maybe she has. Um, what I'm hearing you say is blah, 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 blah. And then kind of helping guide the student to what they are trying to get to in a way that makes them part of it, rather than just you giving them a solution or giving them something.
Hmm.
This is how I refer students to counseling a lot, is if they're talking to me like, oh, I've been so stressed out, I've been really going through this hard time, I'm really homesick. And so, okay, what I'm hearing you say is that you're having a difficult time processing through some of these emotions. Have you ever thought about counseling? And I think that approach to advising is really important, because students can always find the information to what they need. They're resourceful, they're smart. They can go on the catalog and they can look at the degree requirements. But what they're going to remember about their advising process is that their advisor cared about them, that their advisor knew what they were talking about, and that their advisor got them where they needed to go. So I think that's kind of an ethos that's shared amongst all of us up here, with freshman advising. And so that's a really important piece of being a successful advisor, is listening to what the student actually is saying and helping get them where they want to go.
That's really important and wonderful and great to hear. Have you had any experiences where students maybe had difficulty communicating what they really need?
Sure, sure. So we have this a lot where students come in and they think they want to talk about one thing, but they don't really know that this is actually a path that's open to them. We see this a lot more, I would say, at the beginning of the year before, when you're fresh on the campus, you're a new student,
Mhm.
maybe you don't even know. I'll roast myself in this. When I went to college, this is a true story. I was undecided about my major. I didn't know what I wanted to do. But I thought perhaps I would major in something like a humanities discipline, like history or English, and I would get a double major in business so I could have something practical on the side. The college I went to did not have a business major, but I didn't even know this. I was just like, that's totally something I can do. Colleges have business majors, but I didn't even know that was a major that didn't even exist at the college I went to. So I think sometimes our students come here maybe similarly, where they're like, I think I kind of know what I'm doing, but I'm not sure. So one time I had a student come in who was a criminal justice major. I know I already used them as an example, but they came in as a criminal justice major. And as we're talking, I'm like, well, tell me, like, what are you interested in with criminal justice? Like, what do you want to do in this field? And they're like, I actually just really want to be a medical examiner. I really want to do like the science, all the gross stuff. I don't know. I put like an explicit rating on this podcast talking about all the
It's
weird
all good. You can say
crime
whatever.
body stuff. Okay. Talking about like they're going super into detail about how like they just think it's so interesting and about how we can use science to solve crimes and all this, gross stuff. And I was like, well, did you know we have a forensic biology major that might actually get you where you want to go?
Right.
And they're like, wow, I didn't even know we had that major. I didn't even know that was an option. And so then you can kind of open that doorway and talk them through like what that possibility looks like for them. And so I think sometimes you have to be really good at asking questions and
Mm.
not only asking questions, but pausing and letting them answer the questions. I know I said listening already, but I know this is something I work on a lot that I'm not always an expert at, but waiting, because sometimes they come in and they're like, I want to talk about this. And then what they really want is to see if someone's actually going to listen. And they're sizing you up and want to know if you're someone they can trust. So I had a student come in not that long ago. This is, I guess, last year, and wanted to talk about schedule for the spring. And so we did all that, and it was a very like transactional conversation, not unpleasant, but just like, all right, here it is. Great. And I was like, okay, well, anything else you want to talk about? And it was like there was a 2-second pause, and then it was like, actually, yes, and then it just like it totally went in a different direction about some other issues that were going on outside of class. But I think so often, all of us in our lives, like we don't always ask that question of, is there anything else you want to talk about? Is there anything else going on? And just
Right.
giving someone the space to respond to that, because I remember being a student and feeling like I don't even know who to talk to about this. I don't even know how to say what I'm saying, but giving someone space to figure it out along the way and figure out what they're actually getting at is important. And then other forms of communication. I know I mentioned this earlier. Sometimes I do a little bit of coaching with students of how to email faculty. That's the big one.
Very
Um,
good.
we have amazing faculty on this campus, as you both know, that care so much about our students, that are experts in their field, that want to connect with students. But for whatever reason, students can feel intimidated. They aren't sure how to approach them, or maybe their high school experience was they had a negative interaction when they went to a teacher for help. And so they don't always know how to approach a faculty member. So if they're in my office and they're like, I'm really struggling in my English class with Professor Ben said, and I'm like, oh, he's great. Like, so it gives me an opportunity to like, first of all, hype up the faculty, but then second of all, okay, well, how about we draft an email to him and request to meet and talk one-on-one. And so we kind of walk through like, what are some things you should say? What are some things you shouldn't say? And it might seem really basic, but sometimes just being willing to kind of proofread a little email can help take off that intimidation factor, because yeah, I think there's a lot of nervousness with some students about approaching faculty.
Right.
And 9 times out of 10, when I follow up with a student, they're like, oh yeah, we had a great conversation. It was awesome. But it's just like getting over that initial like hump of how do I communicate this, I think is something we also do a lot of work on with students.
Absolutely, and we really appreciate everything that you guys do. That's really amazing, and not just listening and advising and helping them with course schedules, but also connecting students to resources. I think that's great. And I know you mentioned Denison a couple of times. Yeah, we didn't have professional, academic advisors.
Yeah.
I had professors as advisors, and I
Mm-hmm.
met with my advisor maybe a couple of times a year
Mm-hmm.
just to go over what classes to take. But
Mm-hmm.
beyond that, we didn't really have someone to connect with and share,
Mm-hmm.
whatever challenges we're facing beyond academics.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a
And
great thing to know that we have this in Ashland, right?
yeah. And the thing is, I am a big proponent of faculty advising, so I never want it to come across that I'm not supportive of that model. My experience when I was an undergrad, not at Ashland, with my faculty advisor that I had, he was great. He was an amazing mentor, but he was very hands off and was very much like, yeah, whatever you're going to do, go ahead.
Right.
And, I was a pretty conscientious person. And this is, of course, back in the days of like the paper course catalog. So, I'm going through like highlighting things that meet the requirements. But I do sometimes wonder, I reflect back and I think about students who maybe weren't as high anxiety as myself. Because I remember, going through and making sure every single course was going to count towards what I thought I was going to like. I mean, I was very diligent, but that was all on me to do. And I just think back, I wonder about students who maybe weren't that way, didn't have that personality type, or if there was ever a situation of like, wow, they really could have used someone to walk them through something,
Right.
or they really could have used a second pair of eyes on their plan or what they were doing. And so I think that is one of the values of professional advising is, I'm not a chemist. I cannot talk to you about organic chemistry, but what I can do is I can write you a degree plan for chemistry that is going to take into account all the course rotations, all of the things that the department has shared with me, all the things about core that I know about. And so that I think is where we can have such a nice marriage of advising for students, because the students are the ones that benefit from that relationship,
Right.
is getting that degree plan their first year, getting it solid, and then moving on and getting a faculty advisor who they can really dig in on content with and have those conversations about, things they're passionate about, and talk about, video editing, which I know nothing about, or talk about, nursing and things like that with those experts in the field. So I really actually like and appreciate the way we do advising here quite a bit. And I think it's a really unique thing that maybe people don't realize is special and unique to how we do advising. It's one of our hidden gems.
No, it is absolutely. I think this is I don't want to say unique, but it's really special about AU, and a lot of other institutions don't offer the services that we offer, especially
Mm-hmm.
when it comes to advising. Now, Lauren, let me ask you this. So how was the transition, working with Victoria as an academic advisor to now working with faculty advisor?
It's been good, but I think I'm also like you, Victoria. I'm like pretty good at going in and seeing what I can do. Like I'm pretty good
Mm-hmm.
at seeing what what has to happen next for me. So I did it
Mm-hmm.
myself, and then I went to my advisor, who's Dave McCoy in the journalism department, and he just
Mm-hmm.
said like, okay, these journalism classes look good for your next year. So he just kind
Mm-hmm.
of looked at it from a journalism perspective, and he was
Right.
like, that looks good, and the rest was
Mm-hmm.
like core, and he was like, that looks good. So
Mm-hmm.
everything looked good on his end, and for me, it looked good because I like did the research. So
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
it looked good that way. But
Mm-hmm.
I also had a question for you.
Okay.
Um, do you have any advice? And also, this is for like undecided students.
Mm-hmm.
Did you have any advice or core classes they should take if they don't know what major that they're looking for?
That's such a great question. So let me answer it once from what I did as a student, and then maybe don't do it the way I did it. So when I was an undergrad, like I said, I came in undecided. I knew that I was a person that liked to read. I liked to write. I hated school. Sorry, that's me putting again myself on blast. Like I
I'm
hated school.
shocked.
Ah! I did. I hated school. I was a terrible student in high school because I didn't study. I tell my students that a lot because it just wasn't for me. And so I was so excited to go to college because I thought, like, finally, I'm going to be at a place where everyone is here because they love to learn. And that's the only reason why people go to college, which we know is not necessarily true.
Right.
So, yeah, so that was a bit of a rough patch for me. But what I did was I took classes that satisfied core requirements, but that were in areas I was interested in. Now, of course, not every major has a course that's also a core class. You can't always get every single double dip that exists. So I took some things, and what happened for me was I took an intro to religion course, and that professor and I really connected, and he really reached out to me and made an effort to connect with me and ended up becoming my advisor, and that ended up becoming my major. Of course, I loved my major. I had a great time doing it, but I often wonder if I would have ended up in that major if I hadn't had someone proactively reaching out to me and noticing me and caring about me showing up to class. So that
Interesting.
was a big part of how and so I think about that a lot with students here. Totally different environment. And a class that we have here that I don't know if everyone knows about, but I love to recommend is occupational life calling. So it's offered through the College of Business. It's Business 151. It is offered every semester, and it is a course that is specifically designed for students who are deciding about what they want to do. In this spring, it's being taught by Catherine Williams, who is my boss's boss, my grand boss. She'll be so embarrassed I said that on this podcast, but she's my grand boss. But she is the instructor for that course. And I have heard so many amazing things from students who start in that course not knowing what they want to do or having an idea. And that course really does an amazing job of digging in on what your values are, what skills you have, what you want to maybe pursue, separate from like a major or a job. Like, what are you into? What do you want to do? And from there, kind of working backwards and choosing a major and a pathway. And it is for credit. So please recommend your friends to that course.
Absolutely.
It if you're not into that course or you don't want to take it, it is credit bearing, so it still is going to give you credits towards graduation. So I think sometimes people get really nervous, and I see this a lot with students. They get really nervous. You guys are so great at being efficient, and you are so great at being economical. You want to get what you've paid for, and so I sometimes see a reluctance from students to take courses that are exploratory. I think sometimes students are like, well, I don't know about taking sculpture because if it doesn't count towards my major, then I've just wasted my time in that class. And it's like, that's not really true.
Right.
You can learn a lot of things in courses, whether they're core or not, that you can take with you into whatever you end up majoring in. So it might surprise you to know that my first semester of college, I took computer science and I took Arabic, neither of which I had any aptitude for. And still don't. But I took those two courses, and what you can take away from them, you can take with you on your pathway to what becomes your major, what becomes your career pathway. And all of the curriculum guides for all of the majors have these built-in spaces for what we call general electives. They all have built-in room for you to explore. So don't be afraid of taking a course because it sounds interesting to you. Not everything has to directly translate into a major because the exploration part of it can be so much more valuable to you in the long run. I know that's a very long-winded answer to your question, but that would be my advice from someone who was once an undecided student and maybe didn't go about it the smartest way, and now who works with students. Kristen Herrick is our advisor for deciding students. She is amazing. She's an AU alum, and she is also willing to talk or work with any student, even if they are declared right now, but are like, actually, I'm secretly deciding. My major is declared this, but I actually am more feeling like unsure. I know she'd be glad to talk with anyone, and she's a lot of resources as well.
That's amazing. You guys have maybe the best team on campus.
Well, that is a very nice thing to say. I of
Your
course am really biased. I think we do
niceness
too.
barometer of niceness is this high, you know?
Oh, well, I like that. I certainly agree. And I do want to take the opportunity just to brag about the group up here on the seventh floor, the other advisors, fantastic people that genuinely care about students. And not only do they genuinely care, they know their stuff.
Right. Right.
It is my genuine experience that the people up here will find the answer. If we don't know the answer, we will find it and we will get it back to you in a timely manner. So I think that reputation precedes us, and that's a
Wonderful.
positive reputation that precedes us. And I am really grateful to work on a team that has that reputation. And it's something I try to contribute to as much as I can. So
Wonderful. I have a completely unrelated question to this
okay.
podcast.
All
So
right, I'm
who
ready.
was your advisor at
Oh,
Denison?
oh
Faculty
no.
advisor. Was it with your
Yes.
it
Yes. How did
was?
you guess? Yeah. How did you guess? Yeah.
Well,
So
I think it's been there for so long.
he
So
still is, I got a little, I got curious just recently. I don't know if you ever get this way, but I was like, I wanted to look at the course catalog to see what was being offered in my home department. And Denison, he still was on the roster for fall semester. He had a teaching
oh
load for
wow,
fall.
yeah.
But yes, Dr. Woodyard, who I have nothing but respect and love for, who helped me in so many ways. He was a big proponent. I don't know if like how well you knew him when you were a student or if you knew him much, but he, as an advisor or as a mentor, he would do this thing where you come into his office, which was like what you in your mind as a child, if you're like a bookish child who loves reading and you picture like what a professor's office looks like, that was Dr. Woodyard's office. It was packed with books to the ceiling. I have a picture of it. I mean, books falling over, stacks everywhere. And he would sit back in his chair with his leg up and he would just go like, and just
That's
wait.
what that's what Teresa Durbin Ames' office looks like, but
Really?
it's like scripts. She has like stuff like
Oh
that.
my gosh. Yeah.
Yeah.
And he would just, back to the listening thing, he was a great listener, and not only listening, but drawing you out by listening, not by asking like all these invasive questions, but by just sitting back and waiting for the person he's talking to fill the silence, right? Because we're all a little uncomfortable sometimes with awkward silences. That man could never be uncomfortable with a silence. He would ask a question and then just sit back and just look at you, just wait for you to answer. And so then as you're trying to have this conversation, you say more than maybe you thought you were going to say when you went into this meeting, and revealing more about what you wanted than what you thought was true. But yeah, so he was a great recruiter for the religion department, as you may have experienced. I don't know if you did or not, but great recruiter for the office or in the department, and someone that I really respect a lot. But another person that I really think about a lot when I think back to my experience as an undergrad and in my major was the department's administrative assistant. So her name was Erin, and she was our, we call them AAAs, academic administrative assistants. So she was the AAA for the religion department. And you had to get past her desk to go into the faculty offices. And she is the person that kind of became a de facto advisor for me. She was always checking in. It was always genuine. And I remember one time, I had this really difficult family situation going on at the time and just didn't really want to talk about it, but it was really eating away at me. Right. And so like she checked me in for this meeting with Dr. Woodard, and I'm just like sitting there. And I'm sure like in my mind, I'm like, I look so professional, but clearly she could see that like something was going on. And I remember just her just coming over and, really talking with me. And then of course just like I ended up having this really long conversation with her and how encouraging she was to me and how that experience really meant a lot to me as a student, because I was like, she's not even supposed to be like a student facing person, like, and just that level of care and connection from her really meant a lot to me, and we really connected, and we still kept in touch to this day. Like, we've exchanged cards and like we've met up. And so she's retired now and she's not an administrative assistant anymore. But and that I think about that a lot too. Like when I think about all the pieces and parts that make me who I am as an advisor and as a professional, I don't only think of the people that were literally my advisor, but I think about all these people that cared about me along the way and helped get me on the path that I am, and trying to remember that every interaction you have with a student or with a colleague has the potential to matter in the long run. So
That's amazing. I didn't know Dave Woodyard that much, but
Mhm.
I was the TA for Dr. Ramahi. I don't know if you took your Arabic class with her.
Oh, yes, yes,
You did, okay.
yes, yes. Oh, that's
I
so great.
he
What
actually
was
was a
your major?
TA. Mine was communication. I wanted to major in, something because I came in as a transfer student after finishing a BA in literature and linguistics in English, literature and linguistics. So I wanted
Okay,
to major in something completely different, like marketing or
sure. Yeah.
business. The closest thing was communication studies. That was my
Oh my gosh.
major.
Oh, that's
Yeah.
great. Yes, I took like the one. This is another like story from the vault of like, don't do what I did. Um, I waited until my literal last semester to take my communication core class. And when I say they're the motivation level and the discipline level of a last semester senior to do anything was very low. It was a public speaking and debate class, and that was the only class I ever took in communication. And I got through it, but it was my level of commitment was very low. So don't wait till you're a last semester senior to take a required course. That's all I want to say. That's my word of advice to the podcast.
Awesome.
If any students listen, Lauren, don't do that. Don't be like me. I know you're a much better student than me, but uh, yeah.
So you mentioned a lot of things about looking at the student as a whole.
Mhm.
How do you integrate a holistic approach in your advising sessions to make sure that students receive support beyond just academics?
Great. What a great question. So this is something I've started doing maybe in the last semester or two. I don't know if I did it with Lauren or not, but literally every single appointment, I ask the question, how is your mental health? I will ask every single student, and I get a wide variety of answers. And students that you don't expect will say certain things that you don't expect to hear. And a piece of advice that I got when I was just starting out as an advisor is don't open a box you can't close. And so for me, I'm not a licensed therapist. I am not. I'm not a licensed counselor. I can listen, I can, point you to resources, but I think specifically with mental health, it is very important to me to get people to where they need to be. So if a student is struggling and maybe they have preconceived notions about what counseling is, or maybe they didn't even know we had it on campus. We have counseling on campus. It is free. They are licensed counselors and it is confidential. That's another really important piece is sometimes I think students are afraid their coach or their parent or their professor is going to find out they're going to counseling and think of them in a certain way. Um, and that is unfortunately some people's reality. But with counseling here, I do take it very seriously about referring students out and not just counseling. I know it's like a really serious example, but I always like to check in about there's a few main areas that I refer students to a lot. Financially is one of them, counseling is one of them, career center for life calling is another really big one. And through the SOAR network that we use, which is where students make appointments, it's where I log appointment notes. We also have a lot of functionality in that system to refer students elsewhere. So it's a way to keep students connected and get them the answers they need to the questions they have. So, like in the case of a counseling referral, if I'm meeting with Lauren, I'm like, Lauren, how's your mental health? And she's like, you know what? It's not great. And I'm like, great. Well, not great, but okay. Have you ever thought about counseling? And maybe we have that conversation and she's open to it. Then I will do a counseling referral through the SOAR network. And that goes directly to the counseling office and just says, hey, I talked to the student. This is what they're having concerns about. And then the counseling office will reach out to the student and then they will have a conversation. I will never know if that student has met with counseling or not because of privacy and
Mhm.
confidentiality, but I know at least that I have put the referral out there and that the appropriate office has reached out. And I think that's really important to do with all of our students. I do that a lot at the beginning of the year. We kind of run through a list of support services on campus, and I'm like, which one do you want to know more about? It's not really a question of do you want help? It's what do you think? Which one's the best one for you right now? I don't really give them an
Mm.
option. I kind of like give them that false illusion of having a choice. I'm like, which do you want to have more information about? Is it, you want to hear more about financial aid? Do you want to hear more about student engagement on campus, tutoring resources, the WCC? Like, where do you think you could use a little extra help right now? And some students are like, all of it. And some students are like, I don't know, like maybe with writing, I guess. I'm like, great, WCC referral. And so I think making it part of the regular check-ins that we do, it's not just what do I know that I can give you, it's who else can help you and along this pathway and this journey, because it takes a village, and our commitment to helping students at different points along wherever they need help is something we're consistently trying to get better at. We're trying to use the tools we have to get students to the right resources, because we're a small campus, right? There's really no excuse why I
Right.
shouldn't know where things are. But oftentimes I'm so surprised to hear from students, staff, faculty that people don't know what other people do, and therefore don't really know how to help them and don't know where to get them. And so that's something our office has really committed to through the referrals and SOAR, and through other connections with the departments, to try and make sure we are constantly like, oh, I know who you should connect with. Let's go this way. Rather than just like, well, I guess you could look into that more. Bye. Because in my experience, and as my experience as a student, you're overwhelmed already, and that's not something you're going to necessarily do if you're made to do it on your own.
Wow. I was just gonna say, it's such a powerful question. How are you doing? It's how's your mental health? It's open-ended, but it also informs all aspects of their lives.
Yeah. And I think sometimes people are uncomfortable with it. And I think the reason I've started doing it is because it's a more direct question than how are you doing? Because that in our culture has become such a, you just say fine, right? Like no matter,
Right,
like
right.
your puppy could have just died and you say, I'm fine, how are you? Like that's, I mean,
Yeah.
like that's just how it is, right?
Just like saying hello, yeah.
Yeah. And so, and I think that sometimes you need to be a little bit more direct. And I did a training many years ago on mental health awareness and suicide prevention. And that is what the speaker said at the time that really stuck with me was, you know, people, I think, especially with mental health, are really afraid to just call it out and say what it is. And so we tiptoe around it a lot. And we're like, oh, how are you doing? But really you just need to say, like, how's your mental health? What are
Right.
you doing right now for your mental health? And it's funny, I get a wide range of responses. Some students are like, I don't know, I haven't really thought about it. Or some students are like, actually, kind of bad. It's kind of crappy right now. Or some students are like, you know what, it's really good. I was having a rough week last week, but this week I went out with my boyfriend and we got dinner and I'm feeling much better now. So it does open the door, I think, in a
Right,
more authentic way than how are you doing? At least in my
right, right.
experience. So,
I'll start integrating this question in my
yes,
conversation
please,
with
please
our
do.
coaches.
Yeah, please do. I think it's really valuable, and I think, at least in my experience, I think people appreciate being asked.
Very good.
Now, of course, this is a private conversation, door closed in my office. It's not like I'm seeing you out on the street, like, how's your mental health?
Right,
But
right.
I do think once you've had that, especially if it's a student and have, worked on that, building that trust a little bit, then I think it can open a lot of doors.
Very good.
Yeah.
How do you navigate difficult conversations with students? And they imagine maybe you find yourself in those situations quite often, right? Especially if you're discussing academic performance or even maybe changing majors.
Sure. Great question. So I would say there's a couple different types of difficult conversation. Um, and every advisor is different. We all have our own flavor of how we would approach this. Um, if it's the case of an academic performance issue. So I'll be honest, this is the time of year when some students appear out of the woodwork that I maybe haven't seen all semester, who have not come to their required advising appointments. I don't really know them that well, but I have a sense that things are not going well because we have amazing faculty, as I've said, who are putting up flags and academic alerts in the SOAR network, which come to me and say things, like, Lauren's not coming to class, or, and I'm like, I know this Lauren kid's a real troublemaker, but Lauren has not responded to any of my emails. I'm just using you as an example, Lauren. I know this would never be you. And maybe that student then finally sends an email out of the blue and it's like, I need to talk to you. I am really struggling. And so they come in, and of course, we're at the point now where it's too late to really make changes to your schedule.
Mm,
And sometimes that's where those conversations get real quick. And I'm a person that likes to present the facts. So I'm like, here's the reality of the situation. You have to earn this GPA to be here in the spring. You have to pass this class. You got to do this. So once we've presented with all the facts, then we get down to the how are we going to do this together? And I like to, and I know all of us have our students that we are meeting with weekly or bi-weekly, because sometimes it's as simple as knowing somebody's checking in on you.
right.
And a lot of times when students are going through a difficult time and a difficult conversation needs to be had, it's not because they're trying to make you angry with them. I think sometimes we get frustrated with students or with coworkers or whoever because it's like, man, they just really keep screwing this up. Like they're really just blowing it. And a lot of times it's not because they're trying to mess up. It's because they've gotten themselves in a hole or there's something going on that's below the
Mm,
surface that they don't want to talk about. And so I think we've all had those meetings with students where you're kind of gearing up for, oh man, this is going to be a tough conversation. And then you're going to have to read them the riot act and like, have a come to Jesus conversation. And then they get to your office and then they start crying because they had this really traumatic family thing happen back in September and they are far from home and they didn't know who to talk to. And so they just stopped going to class. So on the one hand, you're like, man, I wish you had come to me sooner because we would have had different options then.
right.
But I'm always a person that likes to present options because you always have choices. They might not always be great choices, but you always have choices. And so I think with a difficult conversation, and I've been this way too, when you feel like you're backed into a corner and you don't have any option, that's when bad things can happen and you can get angry, you can get upset. And I think when we go into those difficult conversations, like, well, here's your option. You can completely withdraw, or you can go to tutoring, you can start going to class, and you can pass all your classes. Those are your options. And I think sometimes having that choice, even if it's not, again, not the greatest choice, that gives some freedom and some agency back to the student. And
Right.
I think that helps a lot. So that's like the one difficult type of conversation. The other difficult type is dealing with a student who, like they've come in, they've talked to you a million times, and they're not happy in their major, but they're in that major because it's what their parents want them to do, or it's because they have
Right.
a scholarship in that major and they have to stick with it. And again, all you can do is give choices. So you can just say, hey, this is your life, it's your degree, you're earning this degree, not me. And these are some options that you might consider. And you can share stories with them about other people on campus, other students you've seen. And I think just sometimes knowing they're not alone, knowing that someone else has been through that path is very
Mm,
meaningful to them. I like to say all the time, when I was in college, I didn't even know academic advisor was a job that you could have because I didn't have one. And now that I'm in this job, I love it. And it's the perfect job for me. It's a perfect career for me. But I had no idea when I was 18 years old and choosing my major that this would be where I'd end up. Um, Sometimes I think that can be really helpful is to just hear about someone else being in that boat,
right.
and knowing someone else has been down that road before you and has lit the torch along the way that you can follow along. Um,
Yeah, I love the idea of giving them choices, I think, or options.
yeah.
I think many times that when I have conversations with students, it sounds like, okay, this is the end of the world. From their
Mm-hmm.
perspective, it is the end of the world. But from
Mm-hmm.
our perspective, we can see different options that they might have,
Mm-hmm.
and there's no need for overreacting. But
Sure.
I completely understand, being in their shoes, the age and right. So you
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
understand this is a huge deal for them. But giving them
Sure.
those options, I think can
Mm-hmm.
not only give some clarity, but also, as you said, empower
Mm-hmm.
them and give them that agency.
Mm-hmm.
At the end of the
Mm-hmm.
day, they are adults, right? Well, at least most of
Yep.
our students are adults.
Sure.
Um,
And
so
it's just
yeah, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Victoria. What are
oh,
you gonna?
I was just gonna say, it's a hard place to be. I mean, I this is something I heard a speaker say a million years ago, like a conference. It's like when you're first starting out in college, you have this weird, like paradoxical thing where everyone's telling you you're an adult and you've got to be an adult, but at the same time, you have no clue what you're doing. And that's at least
Mhm.
how I felt when I was a freshman in college. I remember this is a true story. It was in my freshman like seminar class. And I had to go to the bathroom. And so I raised my hand and asked if I could go to the bathroom. And the professor like basically shamed me in front of the entire class and was like, "You don't have to ask, just get up and go. You're an adult." And that was mortifying to me as a person that like already was like pretty high anxiety, high stress, felt like I did not belong at the college that I went to. Like I felt very much like I was out of my league. That was horrifying to me. And so I try to keep that in mind sometimes because I think when a student comes to you, especially when you've worked here for a while and you know the answer and you're like, well, just go talk to financial aid. Like, what's the problem? But like
Mhm.
to them, that's hard because they've never had to do that before and maybe have never been asked to do something of their own volition before. They've always just been following a route, following a path. Like I go to class, I go to practice, I go home, I do homework, I go to bed. I have to live under my parents' roof, my parents' rules. And now you're here and it's like, okay, well, you're in class from 9 to 10, and then you've got 10 to noon free. Then you're in class again from 1 to 3. And then the rest of your day is up to you. And it's fun and it's freeing and it's exciting, but it's also really scary. And
Right, right,
I see Lauren nodding. So it's a really scary time. And I think not to like infantilize or patronize our students, but I think sometimes we need to be a little bit more gracious about,
right.
okay, well, here's the steps you need to take. Here are some choices you could make. The choice is yours because you're an adult, but here are some options you could consider. So that's something I try to remind myself of a lot when working with students, especially because I primarily work with freshman students. So it's that same group over and over again.
Right, right.
Yeah.
So let's move on to some serious questions here,
Oh,
Victoria.
I thought we were already on the serious questions. Okay.
We were just warming up.
Oh, okay.
What's your favorite spot to go to on campus?
Oh, wow. What a great question. Well, the cheap answer is I genuinely love the seventh floor, which is where I work. So seventh floor of the library, come on up anytime. Everyone's welcome. We have bean bags, outlets to plug in your phone, laptops, etc. We have snacks, a Keurig, things
Wait,
that are just
do you have chargers?
no, we have outlets. We have
Oh,
outlets.
okay. I was gonna
But
say my
that but
phone
as
is
I've been
always
told
dying.
from
So.
student no we actually I think we do have a few phone chargers up here that we just miscellaneously have. So feel free, come on up.
Okay, all
We're
right.
trying to get a charging station, but we'll see if that happens, like they have in the student center. So I genuinely love being up here. I think that we have a positive environment. There's, it's always a good vibe. So come on up, enjoy our space. Even if you don't have an appointment, you're allowed to come up and hang. Other places on campus. Um,
Where do you like to go and eat?
I
Lyceum, Nest,
I
Combo.
I'm trying to like not go to the Cafe Lyceum all the time because it's in my building now. So I know that if I just make that a habit, then my wallet and my caloric intake will be very upset. So but I do love going to the Eagle's Nest. I love seeing my students. We call it field advising. We as a group, as the advisors, we tend to when we have the meal swipes, we'll go to Convo once a week and see who we see. And sometimes those students do not want to be seen by us, and sometimes they do. But this is genuinely true. This was last semester. We went, and there was one student who was just ghosting another one of the advisors, like just had said they were going to show up and didn't show up. And there's a lot of things going on. And so she's like, if you see so and so, you let me know. And so one of us did see him, and she went over to his table and was like, hey, you've been avoiding me. What's going on? And so yeah, no one is safe. We will find you. That's a threat, but it's said with love, is that we will find you. And yeah.
That's awesome. Lauren, do you go to the cafe a lot?
I've been to it a few times, usually right before work. I like the flatbread they have there. I usually get
Mm.
that. And then I don't know what it's called, but they have like juice, but it's like fizzy, so it's not pop. It's like
Oh, is it
juice.
kombucha?
They have that too, but I'm talking
Mm.
about something else. But it's really good. It's like flavored juice That's fizzy.
In a bottle.
Yes, it's in a bottle, and it's like tinted bottles. They're really good. I got the kiwi one. It was delish. I would recommend.
Awesome.
Yeah, it was so good.
I love that.
Yeah, we're so close to the cafe, so I'm trying to cut down on my caffeine intake, but this is not helping.
Yep, for sure.
So, Victoria, do you have any hobbies or interests that might surprise your student advisees or your colleagues?
Oh, well, I think my shtick is that I have a lot of interests and hobbies, which is why I love the College of Arts and Sciences and why I'm so grateful to be an advisor for that college, because I have lots of interests. So I used to be a beekeeper.
Oh,
I think
wow.
that's like my go-to fun fact that a lot of people know about me. So I used to be a beekeeper. I do theater, so I'm a big community theater person. I am a board member of the Mansfield Shakespeare Company, so look us
Really?
up if you want to. Yes, so that's something else I have going on. Other facts about me, hobbies wise, I love knitting, sewing, do lots of crafty type things. Reading, of course, so love to read. So working, it's funny, you think about being a kid and it's like, man, if I could just be in a library all day, and now I am. So it's
You
like,
are.
here I am. I have 26 nieces and nephews, so I'm the world's greatest aunt. So yeah, that's other fun facts about me, I guess.
Wow. So do you still keep bees? That's
I
interesting.
so I so I used to keep bees at my old house. So I used to live out in the country and I had bees, and now I live in town, so I can't have them anymore. So that's why I'm no longer a beekeeper. But yep, I was a beekeeper and had chickens and the whole
Oh,
gambit. And
it's
now I just have a
amazing.
vegetable garden and a very fat house cat.
Do you perform?
Yeah, I do. Not as much as I used to. I'm more of a backstage person now. I do a lot of costume work, but I'm really involved at the Mansfield Playhouse. So, because that's where I live. I live in Mansfield. And I'm a big supporter of AU theater projects. I love coming out and seeing my students perform. I have my tickets for the Madrigal. Very
Oh,
excited
awesome.
about that. Yeah.
What's your next play that you're going to be performing at?
Oh, great question. I just finished one actually at Ohio State Mansfield. So as I told my friend when we were talking about it last week, that I am officially now in hibernation mode. So I'm hibernating now, not in any shows at the moment, but I will probably be costuming the next youth theater production at the Mansfield Playhouse, which I believe is Frozen, which
Oh,
if
wow.
you like
When is
Disney and
that?
like Frozen, I'm not. I mean, yeah, it's going to be in I think February are the performance dates. But
Gotcha.
yeah,
Okay.
and I'll be tag teaming that with my mom. So she's a very talented seamstress and very creative costumer, and a teacher. So she's just like super great working with the youth and making things out of nothing on a shoestring community theater budget. So I'm happy to be her assistant. So I will be doing that with her.
Impressive. Go ahead, Lauren. Sorry.
Do you like costuming because of the costume shop job you did? Like, remember when you told me about
Oh,
the costume
I
shop?
did tell you that. Yeah. So when I was in college, I needed a job because I was again I don't know how much I want to say on the podcast. You can cut this out later. So I did not have any money. I was only able to go to a private college because a very generous scholarship afforded me that opportunity. And so it was like I got to Denison on a Thursday, and Friday I was looking for a job, right? So I was like job hunting. And of course, my college is in a very small town. I didn't have a car. So I was pretty limited, and I had to do something on campus, and I had work study dollars. And so I was just browsing the listings, of jobs. And one of the first ones I found was the costume shop. So the theater department, very robust theater department, and they had a whole team of students. I mean, there was probably 10 or 12 of us that worked the costume shop, and there was a full-time staff member that was over that costume shop. And we were just costume shop. We called it the sweatshop, lovingly. But I worked there all 4 years of college. It was a lot. It was a learning experience. The person I worked for was very meticulous, very detail oriented, and extremely expert seamstress. Like her side job was altering wedding dresses and suits and menswear. And she was a trained tailor, really, is what she was. And so I learned a lot from her about, because I'd known how to sew, my mom sewed and stuff, but learned a lot from her. And it was a great experience, even though I wish I had made more money, but don't we all? So,
Right,
but yeah, that's
right.
something I've carried with me, and I've been costuming really ever since.
That's amazing. Wow. I
Yeah.
was also on a full scholarship at Denison, and
Yeah.
I did almost all jobs that were
Yeah.
available on campus.
Yeah.
I
Yep.
had
Yeah. I
like
was a TA. I worked in the costume shop. I also worked for the chaplain in the Religion and Spiritual Life Center. So yeah, anything. And I house sat for people. Eventually, I did get a car, and I was a dishwasher for a while in the dining hall. Um, yeah, it was. And
I
but
did
the
not
thing is, oh,
I
what?
didn't have a car.
Yeah, I had a
I,
car my last semester, so it was like a very short amount of time.
that's awesome.
But yeah,
I had to pay my roommate to take me to Walmart, so I had to pay him gas
yeah,
money.
yep. Well, yeah, because I mean, there's just the IGA and there's like a CVS, and both of which are like really overpriced. And
Right. And also
Denison was like
far if
perched
you
on a
walk, yeah.
hill. It's like perched
Yeah.
on a hill, so like you got to really walk. It's like the stairs to Mordor and like the Lord of the Rings, if you're a Lord of the Rings person.
Yeah.
So I had amazing calves when I was a student there, climbing all those stairs every day. But when I think back to that now, I'm like, man, that was a lot. Yeah.
Here's another fun question for
Okay.
you, Victoria. If you could advise students in any city or any country in the world for one semester, where would you choose to go?
Ooh, one for just one semester. Okay,
One semester.
I definitely would have to pick somewhere in Ireland. That's an important special place for me. My husband, who is from Ohio, and like he spent several months over there on a work visa when we were younger. And so he had lived there for a time. I applied to a graduate program there when I was still in college. It did not get accepted, which was very devastating at the time. But I thought, like, man, we could be like that cool couple that like lives abroad. So didn't get into that program, but then ended up getting to go to Ireland. We actually went in 2020 before the pandemic. Before the
Oh,
pandemic,
good, 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 good.
yes, we were in Ireland in January of 2020, and just fell in love with it. And that was he'd been before, and just such a beautiful country. And obviously, my last name's O'Brien, so I have to be dedicated to Ireland, right?
Right, right.
But I mean, I guess you'd have to say Dublin, right? Because that's the big city there. But the Trinity College Library, if you've never seen pictures of it, look it up. I would love to be an advisor there for a semester just to go and stand in their library. It's one of the most beautiful libraries in the world. But yeah, probably Ireland. It'd be fun
What
to
is
go
it
to a
called?
pub.
The library again?
Trinity College Library
Trinity
in
College
Dublin.
Library. Okay.
Yes, it is stunning. So yeah, that's where I would go.
Yeah,
What
we'll
fun
make sure
question.
to spotlight them in this podcast so they can hear
Yes.
your voice. And when you're tired of AU, not yet, right? We still want
Oh
you
no,
to.
never, never, never. I like to. I love living in the Midwest. People want to dunk on it all the time. I think it's a great place to live. I like being close to things, but I like having some space. Like the weather, I like having seasons. My best friend just moved to Los Angeles about 5 years ago, and
Oh,
she
wow.
loves it. And of course, it's amazing. But she's like, it's weird living somewhere that doesn't have seasons. It's just
Yeah.
the same all year round. And I like the seasonal nature of Ohio. And yeah, it's where my family is. So Midwest is best. That's my
That's awesome.
yeah.
So, Victoria, what final advice would you give to new students to make the most out of their academic journeys?
Ooh, that's a good question. Um, don't be afraid to try things that you didn't think you would like. I know that that feels really cliche, but when I came, again, just from my own experience, when I went to college, what was gonna happen is not what would happen. I went to college thinking I was going to finally like be an intellectual. And I was like, this is going to be it for me. And at first, when I realized that's not what it was, or it was, of course, it was a great place of intellectual development, but that it wasn't this like sterile environment of like people sitting around reading old leather books. Like I was pretty disappointed at first and thought about transferring, I thought about withdrawing. And I'm so glad I didn't, because I ended up discovering these new things about myself. I ended up getting that job in the theater department. I wasn't a
Right.
theater major, wasn't even a theater minor, but I met people through that job, and I learned skills through that job, and taking courses in computer science and Arabic and religion, and taking things that I thought, well, I guess we'll see where this leads. And meeting friends and people that have impacted and shaped who I've become. I could have never imagined that. I could have never imagined it. And so I think being open to that is advice I would give to my younger self. Like, don't have so much anxiety about trying these new things and meeting these new people, because yeah, some of it's going to suck and some of it's going to be really hard, but a lot of it's going to be amazing, and it's going to teach you new things about yourself and be part of who you become. So that's what I would say.
Yeah, thank you very much.
I hope
Lauren,
that's not
any
too
final
cheesy.
comments, questions?
I don't think so.
All right. Victoria,
Yeah.
thank you so much. We really
Yeah.
appreciate your time and
Yes.
being so gracious and
Well,
so insightful.
thank you for having me. This has been such a
Absolutely.
pleasure. I hope I didn't talk about myself too much, but
No,
that's
no,
the
this is
self-deprecation is part of the charm. So that's just who I am as a person.
this is wonderful. This is
learn
great.
from
Thank
my
you so
mistakes.
much. Thank you.
Yeah, awesome.
Well,
And
we're
have a
so
great
happy that
weekend.
you're here, and I'm sure
Yeah.
students benefit from you being here every single
Yeah.
day, and we appreciate that.
Well, thanks so much. Well, have
Thank
a
you.
wonderful Thanksgiving, and I look forward to hearing the episode.
Yeah, absolutely. Happy Thanksgiving.
Yep. Okay. Bye.
Thank you, Lauren.
Bye.
Bye. Thanks, Lauren. Bye.